What if there was a safe space for you to explore artificial intelligence? What if there was a team of friendly professionals waiting to help you examine what you can do with AI in your courses? Welcome to the world of what if.
Thank you so much to all of our in-person and all of our online attendees. I'm glad you're joining us on this fabulous Friday, and I'm very excited to present to you today. My name is Jessica Bosinger, and I'm an instructional designer here at the Center for Online and Continuing Education. I'm super excited to talk to you about my topic today, and my presentation for those of you online has been shared with you, and we'll definitely get you, if you're in person, access to this as well. So I'm going to talk to you today about moving the needle and how you can adapt your assignments in your course to bridge the policy that you have for your course and practice. And I have a lot of different information to share with you today, a lot to go through in this 30-minute presentation, but then never fear, we have time to dive in together in the playtime afterwards. So for our in-person attendees, we'll do that. And then for those of you online, I'll try to hop in there as well and answer any questions and really get into ideas with you. So when it comes to the starting point that I would recommend for where to begin when it comes to your assignment design, these are different website resources I included for you, which I will show you today. And definitely, I would say check these out. They're a great starting place as you're considering what your course policy will be. The three different websites are the FAU, Faculty AI Hub, and then the simple syllabus statements. You'll locate on there, and I'll show you how to get to it. And I'll also go through the three different options on there for what you can indicate on your simple syllabi for your policy. And then potentially, if you do one of the two of the three options, how you can ask your students to cite those sources. And there's also information for that on the website. So I'm going to start with that and give you a lot more information on the way. But if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them now or during playtime. Coming back to us here at Florida Atlantic, these are the three policies that I mentioned that you can include your language on your simple syllabus depending on your decisions for your course policy. So AI encouraged, if you select that, that indicates that the use of AI to assist in work assigned for your specific course is encouraged for various purposes. They indicate that you have the students have to cite that per your guidelines. AI flexible means you can use it for specific assignments within the course. So if you indicate that, then your students will know specific assignments that you give them information on, they can use that. Of course, they have to cite for this as well. And I would always recommend that along with the simple syllabus, maybe you put information in your assignment directions for them. So that way they can see, like, if there's a specific tool that you want them to use. We have many FAU endorsed AI tools. One of them I'll show today, which is Google Gemini. So maybe you want to put in your assignment that you want them to use Gemini and how you want them to use that, how you want them to cite it. And maybe they can use that tool for that specific assignment, but not for a different one. So AI flexible. And then, of course, AI prohibited. Perhaps in your course, that's your decision that they're not going to be able to use AI in any of their assignments. So once you've decided that, I wanted to give you options for how you can create assignments. And this would be regardless of the policy that you select. I'm going to show you strategies. I'm going to show you what it might look like. And then I'll get into some examples. And for the purpose of today, I chose to do kind of more of a nursing set of examples. But I'm hoping that I'll convey to you how this can be utilized in any course. So think about what you teach and your subject area. And even though I'm showing nursing specific examples, you can think about what it might look like for you in your course. So the first strategy that I wanted to present to you is that when you're assigning when you're designing your assignments, you can consider how you can make it a multi-layer assignment. And in that multi-layer, the strategy is that there's multiple interaction components. And that could be where it's interacting for peers. It could be where it's interacting with you as the faculty for feedback. It could be where it's interacting with different resources, like maybe they're starting and responding to this article and then they have to add additional content from this video or this lecture that you presented. So how can you layer the assignment? That's an idea or a strategy. Next would be, how can you personalize an assignment? So when it comes to personalization, how can you connect it to real world problem solving that really apply for the student in the moment and the lived experiences that they have, and connecting it to your content as well as the industry they'll be a part of? That's a really interesting idea for you to consider. And then a multimodal assignment. So in many assignments, it could be that you give them a set of directions and that they're going to have a specific output. So this idea is about making it more of a creative option for that output. And I'll give you some ideas of what that could look like. But it definitely helps with teaching the students design thinking, presentation skills, and all of those will be applicable in any job that they choose to go into. So a little bit about ideas. These are just a few for each of these strategies. What might a multi-layer assignment look like? How could I do that? The first thought is that you could have scaffolded mini assignments. This is one that I see a lot, and I really personally enjoy, because when I was doing my master's degree, I think that this was a very intentional setup. I did a fully online degree, and these were actually really helpful and made me very excited each week to see how I would add on to that final product. So if you're not sure about what I mean by the mini assignments, think about a project for your course that maybe it's an end of term project and they create something, whatever that happens to look like, right? The idea of it being, instead of it being they're working on it independently and then at the end they give it to you, you can instead have little mini assignments where they turn in parts of that. And it can be whatever you would like it to be. You can set that criteria. But that way, let's say on week 2, they submit this part. And then week 4, they submit this part, and they're continuously adding on and revising as they add, their knowledge and reflections from what they're learning in your course. And they're building towards that final product still, but it gives you time to give them feedback on each of those options so they can hear from you, learn from you. And you could also consider using discussion posts or peer review in Canvas so that they get feedback from their peers as well. And I had several projects that were set up like that, and I see a lot of professors doing things like this with these long-term projects. I think it really helps to chunk the information so that it's not finish this whole big thing right now. And it helps so that the students can be guided by you as the expert so that the end product that they create will be stronger, and potentially something that maybe they include in a portfolio that they can show off one day at an interview. So that's probably my favorite, but I really like all of these ideas. The peer interaction components, I'll actually show you some direct examples of. So instead of it being where they might just respond to something and give you that output, they have multiple interactions within that one assignment. So it could be peer review, it could be responding to each other's posts in a thread on a discussion board, or really anything you can think of. The third option would be interactions with different sources. So rather than it being peer-to-peer, maybe you're having the first output that they give you is based off of this source, and then they're adding on to it. So those are some ideas for that. Personalized assignments, very much what they sound like. They're personalized to the student, to the location, to what they're seeing around them, to their lived experiences, things they've seen, and of course, removing identifiable information and things like that. But they're going to be talking about what they've experienced. And that can be really powerful because it connects to what am I seeing right now in the day-to-day, and how does that connect to what I'm learning right now. And then multimodal assignments could include different outputs. So it could be a flow chart instead of, a text reply to whatever prompts you give them. You ask them to make a flow chart instead. It could be an infographic. It could be a case study profile. There's many more, but those are just a few. Some of my favorites that are more of the auditory and video type of deliverable might be where they submit a podcast, a narrated presentation perhaps, or branching simulations. And I did link here to a previous presentation for a playground that we did. I'll show you it very briefly, and I'll show you an example that my colleague Tanya did that day for her playground. This playground was on creating interactive paths and personalized assignments. And I really loved this presentation because I actually did something similar during my online degree, and I had to create my own branching scenario. I think that it can be used in any subject that you might teach, and I'll give you some ideas that she had shared that day for what it might look like. But definitely, I would recommend checking this out. We have a whole playlist of our previous playgrounds that you can see on YouTube. And this one I'm going to be talking directly about today when it comes to that multimodal assignment type. I think that a branching simulation would be something very interesting for your students to get to create, or you potentially to create, which is what Tanya kind of shows you how to create them yourself. And so definitely check that out. If this is a lot, I know, and I'm trying to give you a bunch in 30 minutes, but digest as you like, and feel free to ask questions. I'm excited to chat about what this might look like for you all, but I wanted to give you some prompts. These are ready to go. You can use them in the AI tool of your choice. I would recommend the AI endorsed tools we have here at Florida Atlantic, so Gemini or Copilot. I did test these myself in both of those, and they're working pretty well. I tried to make them so that they're like our normal plug and play type of prompts. So if you see the bolded parts, that's where you can insert your specific information. It goes through everything that I talked about very quickly, but kind of gives the AI tool a sense of what you're trying to create. And I do have a different one for multi-layer, personalized, and multimodal, but that's not to say that you have to design an assignment just one way. The examples that I'll go through, I tried to consider how could this be personalized and how could I have it being a multimodal type of assignment. So you can mix and match, but these prompts should at least get you a starting point for ideas. All you have to do is give it your course name and then a topic. If you have more, I'll do a quick demo at the end and kind of tell you what that might look like. But if you start there and ask it for ideas, the AI will quickly generate some for you. The assignment that I chose to kind of focus on as the starting point is from our AI Playground Canvas Commons. It's titled Practicing Patient Communication. And all of my examples will be nursing, but I hope to convey to you that you can use this for any type of course that you teach. But always, of course, as an instructional designer, as an educator, I want to encourage you to start with what is your policy, up to you, and then also what do you want the students to learn from that assignment. So at the end of that particular assignment, what do you want to see that they're able to do? These are the objectives for this specific assignment that you can find in Canvas Commons. In Canvas Commons, all of our assignments have ready to go directions. They also have a video. I linked to the video for this one. And the video is kind of like an explainer video that walks you through the assignment. They also have a rubric that's ready to go. And I would say that these assignments, if you have an AI encouraged or AI flexible policy, are ready for you to adapt. And even if you have an AI prohibited policy, still check these out. I'm going to show you some ways you can kind of move the needle and adjust things back and forth pending your policy today. About this assignment in particular, as I go through some examples, there's a simulated patient interaction. I won't read you all the directions, but you can check it out in Canvas Commons. And essentially the AI plays the role of the patient. So the students are going to interact with that AI tool. Of course, the AI tool is not going to do everything perfectly, but that is actually part of the multi-layering that you can see in this assignment design. And this is nursing specific, but think about an assignment that you have. You might have multiple parts within your assignment. I'd encourage you to think of that as different layers that you're building in as the students are gaining more knowledge or doing different parts. This particular one, I would consider the first layer the AI tool interaction, where they're actually prompting and talking to the AI. They're noticing things. And then the layer 2 is the analysis, which in the directions, it gives them explicit stuff to do for that. But they have to review the AI outputs. They are noticing and building that AI literacy skill that it's going to hallucinate. It's going to have things that just aren't right. And hopefully they'll be able to connect that back to the content and the resources that you give them and the research. And then that third layer with the peer collaboration. And you can see the directions on there for that. There's some ways that you can consider to do that, but this is a ready to go one, and they're going to bring those analyses to the table and be able to actually learn from their peers and have that social learning, which is so valuable. Next example, kind of along the same idea, where they're doing a simulated patient interaction, but perhaps this would be multi-layered for someone who has an AI prohibited policy. So I think this would be very interesting as a discussion board. You could set it up as an assignment as well in Canvas, and you could have it be peer reviews set up. That's an option, and there's more options. Those are just two easy to think of ones. The first layer, and no AI use for this, the students are going to post a video response where they're acting as a patient in the scenario. And in the setup above, I chose to be like, okay, you could either give the students the scenario you want or provide them with a list of options. I always go for the list of options because I think it makes it more interesting for me, as well as more interesting for the students, because when they're interacting with their peers and they're watching the video responses, maybe they choose a peer to respond to that chose a different situation. But you can be as explicit as you like. In this case, I had the first video be the students are acting as the patient. The second layer is the students are responding to the layer 1 videos with a different video. And then they have to take on the role of the nurse practitioner. So you have that repeated level of interaction, and then you can set whatever criteria that you want for that. So that way they are really practicing those real life skills, right? So I put here as an example, apply a specific therapeutic communication technique. In that third layer, they're going to respond again. Perhaps it's not a video response. Perhaps it's an infographic. Perhaps it's a podcast style response with just audio. Perhaps it's a text response where they're typing out their thoughts. Whatever you want. In that sense, you can make it multimodal. But they're going to play the role of the consultant. They have to consider the previous 2 posts within the thread and kind of respond to that and connect it to whatever you want. The course content that you're teaching them that's specific to that module. Maybe they also have to state specific examples from the previous interactions or previous layers. I think it creates something really dynamic within a discussion board. And regardless of it being related to nursing, there's probably some type of situation in your field where they're a part of this industry. This is the role they play. They're working with this stakeholder, and they could be that stakeholder in the second situation. And then kind of like the critique part at the end. So even though this is nursing specific, that's just an idea for you to build off of. And this would support, of course, an AI prohibited policy, but you could also have them using AI here if that was what you wanted. I just wanted to give you ideas for what it might look like. This next one is more of the personalized examples. I switched it up a little bit, but still talking about kind of nursing related things. So maybe the students have to prompt AI to act as a difficult professional at a clinic, and their job is to ultimately resolve that conflict. They're having to create relevant scenarios they might have witnessed or researched that are specific to their location, so it brings in that personalized aspect. Of course, I would put in the instructions, like remove identifiable or personal details and such like that, but that way they're connecting it to things they see, experiences they have. I know when I was student teaching, this would have been something that would have been interesting because as you're learning new things and you're practicing in the field, you get a lot with that. So if you have something similar where students do experiential learning or specific things for your content, you can connect it somehow to real world problem solving. Something that I would say you can consider for this, I think this would be very good if you have an AI encouraged or flexible policy, because we do have them utilizing AI here, but you can have them create that branching scenario that I mentioned that my colleague has presented on before. I'll show you what that might look like. And again, her presentation goes through how to make them, but you could actually have the students, instead of, creating a final product where they're just going to have that, video response or things like that, maybe they have to create a branching scenario Google form. So when you click on this link, it will bring you to her example that she showed. And imagine your students create it, or imagine you create one for them and then they have to react to it. In Google Form creation, it's quite user-friendly. I've made some of these myself before. You establish the scenario with the directions, so you could ask your students to do this. They could have different ones that they end up sharing as a final product with the different difficult patient interactions here as an example, or whatever's relevant for your content. Most of the time, Google Form settings, that's what happens on this first one. So you'll have to, if it's selected, acknowledge that it's you. And then from there, this could all be created by the students or created by you for this branching scenario. You can give text information in a Google form. You could give pictures like you see here. And then the idea of it being branching is that depending on which of the options that you select, it brings you to a different response. So you can see here, if I choose this option, it's going to bring me to this next action. Whereas if I chose something different, it would bring me to something different. So that kind of multimodal aspect could be very interesting for your students to create. And then if they get to share it, then they could actually see what their colleagues came up with as well. So I invite you to consider that. The next option for maybe an AI prohibited policy, I offered something similar where they're developing a script and it's dialogue between the difficult professional and the student. They have to represent both sides of the conflict. And so the final product could be a script. What I would encourage here so that it's multi-layered is that maybe you ask the students, one student is going to create the initial script and they have to react to the other student's script. So kind of that same type of example I showed you with the video responses, but it could be text there, or it could be infographics or anything that you think of. But I think that would be really interesting to have them responding directly to other students. It makes you think about, what did that person say? Okay, now let me take in my knowledge of this content. What am I learning this week? How can I apply that? So there's a lot of ways you can set up groups in Canvas, but I've seen it as simple as a table in the directions for like smaller classes, like less than 25, where the professor put a table in the directions and they had like specific roles, and then they put the students' names so they would know how they were grouped. Or you can actually do the group setting in Canvas, or you can let them pick their own groups. But I think that the more you can incorporate that interaction, the more engagement you'll see. For this last part, I know I went through a ton today, but I'm going to show you very briefly this demo. If you are virtual and you have any questions, now's the time to start thinking about them and type them in the chat for me. They'll let me know. But never fear, I plan to jump in virtually as well and join some of the playtime after this. If you're in person, I'm going to definitely touch base with you as well too. And what I have here for you for this quick demo is you can use any tool of your choice. I recommend Gemini or Copilot since those are our endorsed tools. I have the same prompt I showed you earlier. I plugged in, I'm going to do communication for health professionals, staying on that nursing theme, and then my topic would be this. So if you had directions already for your assignments, you can use this prompt to update any assignment you already have or create brand new ideas. That's what I chose to do for this one. So you can see at the bottom, I have included in my prompt, please give me 10 different ideas for my deliverables. So all you have to do is copy paste that prompt directly. Go to the AI tool of your choice. You can see I pasted it right here, and then I'll just go through a few examples with you. So it has all of the information that I went through earlier on the previous slides, and it gave me 10 different ideas. Here's, I'm going to pick out a few that I pre-read that I was like, okay, I like these the best for you guys. So let's say visual, and I want that. I really liked this idea a lot. It's something that maybe I could have thought on my own, but the Gemini gave me it within 30 seconds. So this would be a potential multimodal output, their final product, what they're creating, a clinical room communication heat map. And then it gives you details on what that might look like. It's not going to be perfect, of course, and I'm not an expert in nursing, but once you have the idea, then you take your expertise and adjust it from there. This would be where their output is going to be that they create a final product that's a detailed spatial layout or blueprint of the patient's hospital room. They have to use visual coding to show how nonverbal communication, physical positioning, and environmental distractions impact the provider-patient dynamic. So again, probably not perfect, but there's an idea that I wouldn't have thought of, a different product the students can create, and something that might be very engaging. If I didn't like that, no problem. Prompts Gemini again and say, give me 10 more ideas. Tell it a little bit about what you want, and it'll do its best, and then you take your expertise from there. Second, auditory video narrative options. The one that I liked the best from this, micro lecture, where the students are going to create as their final product the highly focused 5-minute narrated presentation that talks about and feels like a professional development mini module on culturally competent care. So this is nursing, but think about what that might look like for you, what you might stipulate that you want them to do for that, or the interactive simulations. This could be where their final output is choose your own discharge branching scenario, where they have to build a simple branching tool like the one that I showed you from that previous presentation. So from there, if I didn't like any of these or I want to mix and match, I can simply prompt the AI and tell it that, and it will generate ideas for me very quickly. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Are there any questions for me right now in the chat or in person?